Welcome to the Explainer. So let's jump right into an incredibly fascinating and honestly pretty shocking Supreme Court decision. Today, we're unpacking the 1998 case of Alonte versus Savellano. If you are a law student, this is an absolute must-know case digest. It's got everything: a high-profile mayor, explosive allegations of a 20 million peso bribe, the sudden withdrawal of a rape complaint, and a trial judge who just completely bypassed the rules of court to push through a rushed conviction. It is literally a masterclass in exactly why procedural rules exist.
Think about this for a second. Can an accused person be convicted of a heinous crime without an actual trial? Now you're probably thinking, no way, that totally violates the Constitution. But as we're going to see in this explainer, a trial court shortcut in a 1997 rape case created a massive legal controversy, and it forced the Supreme Court to step in and fix it.
To untangle this whole web, we're going to follow the classic fire axe structure. We'll start with the facts of the case, look at the procedural anomalies, dive into constitutional due process, check out the order of trial, examine affidavits of desistance, and wrap up with the Supreme Court's final ruling.
All right, Section 1, the facts of this high-profile case.
To really grasp the legal breakdown here, we've got to look at the human drama first. This involves the accused, Mayor Bayani Alonte, and the complainant, a teenager named Juvilin Palombayan. The alleged crime happens in September 1996. Fast forward to December, and an information for rape is filed against Mayor Alonte of Biñan Manguna. Because the mayor is such a powerful political figure, the complainant actually petitions for a change of venue to Manila, saying she feared for her life. Then things get pretty wild. In March 1997, the complainant's lawyer executes affidavits claiming that she and her client were offered a staggering 20 million pesos to just drop the case. But then, suddenly, in June 1997, the complainant files an affidavit of desistance. She says she wants to withdraw the complaint so she can just live a normal life. All of this culminates in November 1997 when the judge abruptly convicts the mayor.
Moving on to Section 2, the procedural anomalies. Let's step inside the courtroom.
Picture this. It's November 7, 1997, inside Judge Maximo Savellano's courtroom. The accused is arraigned and pleads not guilty. Both parties agree to waive the pretrial. The prosecution then puts the complainant right on the stand, where she affirms her affidavit of desistance, making it clear she doesn't want to pursue the case anymore. Because their star witness won't testify, the prosecution formally moves to dismiss the case. Sounds like the end of it, right? Well, instead of dismissing it, Judge Savellano declares the case submitted for decision. He basically takes the earlier affidavits detailing the alleged crime, documents that were never even formally offered into evidence during a trial, and uses them to find the accused guilty of a heinous crime, sentencing him to reclusion perpetua. The defense was completely, totally bypassed.
Okay, Section 3, constitutional due process.
Let's break down how this procedural shortcut snowballed into a massive constitutional violation. For all the law students out there, you know that in criminal proceedings, jurisprudence gives us 4 non-negotiable requirements for due process. First, the court has to be properly clothed with judicial power. Second, jurisdiction must be lawfully acquired over the accused. Third, the accused absolutely must be given an opportunity to be heard. And fourth, judgment can only be rendered upon a lawful hearing. Now look closely at points 3 and 4. By jumping straight from a motion to dismiss right to a guilty verdict, the trial court completely stripped Mayor Alonte of his fundamental opportunity to be heard. Section 4 now, the standard order of trial under Rule 119. Section 3. The rules of court spell out a very rigid sequence here. Step 1. The prosecution presents evidence to prove the charge. Step 2. The accused presents evidence for their defense. Step 3. Both parties can present rebutting evidence. And finally, Step 4. Only then is the case submitted for decision. So, what happened in Judge Savellano's court? The judge heard the prosecution's motion to dismiss, and then he just immediately jumped to Step 4. He completely skipped Steps 2 and 3. The accused literally never had a chance to present a single piece of evidence or cross-examine the complainant on her original allegations.
There's this really powerful quote from Justice Vitug, who penned the Supreme Court decision for this case. He wrote, "There can be no shortcut to the legal process, and there can be no excuse for not affording an accused his full day in court." I think this brilliantly illustrates that procedural due process isn't just bureaucratic red tape, it's an enshrined constitutional right that protects everyone, even those accused of the most reprehensible crimes imaginable.
All right, Section 5, Affidavits of Desistance and Withdrawing the Complaint. Now you might be thinking, wait, if the victim withdrew her complaint, why didn't the judge just dismiss the whole thing? Well, let's define this concept. An affidavit of desistance is a sworn statement where a complainant says they no longer wish to pursue a criminal action. But here's the crucial takeaway. The Supreme Court looks upon these documents with considerable disfavor. Why? Because they are exceedingly unreliable. They can so easily be secured through intimidation, coercion, or, massive monetary payouts. And that was exactly the suspicion hovering over this case, especially given the earlier sworn statements about a 20 million peso bribe offer.
This is where Article 344 of the revised Penal Code comes in regarding pardons and private crimes like rape. If the offended party pardons the offender before the criminal action is officially instituted, it justifies dismissing the complaint. But if the pardon or desistance comes after the criminal case has been filed in court, which is exactly what happened here, it was filed months after the information was docketed, it does not extinguish criminal liability. At that point, the state has already taken over the prosecution. The desistance is merely treated as a piece of evidence for the court to weigh. It's not some automatic erase button.
Finally, Section 6, the Supreme Court's ruling.
So how did the Supreme Court resolve this huge mess? They handed down a really decisive ruling that tackled both major errors. First, they affirmed that the affidavit of desistance did not warrant the dismissal of the criminal case precisely because it was filed after the action was instituted. But second, they declared the trial court's conviction completely null and void due to that blatant failure of due process. Now, because the conviction was voided, the case wasn't just over. The Supreme Court remanded the case back down to the trial court for proper, lawful proceedings. And lastly, just to ensure absolute fairness going forward, Judge Savellano was enjoined, meaning he was officially disqualified from hearing the case any further.
And to explain taking the judge off the case, the court delivered this striking line. All suitors are entitled to nothing short of the cold neutrality of an independent, wholly free, disinterested, and unbiased tribunal. It's a vital reminder that courts must not only be strictly impartial, but they must also be universally perceived as impartial by the public and by the parties involved.
So here's a thought to leave you with. What happens when public outrage and a desire for swift justice clash with rigid constitutional rights? Alonte versus Savellano proves that no matter how heinous the charges, the scales of justice absolutely demand a fair trial. The rules of procedure are the bedrock of liberty. If you found this case digest helpful for your legal studies, please like the explainer, comment your thoughts below, and subscribe to the channel for more structured visual learning. We'll see you in the next explainer.